So welcome. We've started.
Everybody doesn't know the hell of the last hour, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Jason is available for tech support for your podcasting needs.
Yes, exactly. So welcome, Mark Short. Thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you. As people may not know, I've always been a big fan of Jason and the old what would we call it now? It was like the old website, the original prop blog, which is still a very useful tool, and one that really inspired me to do the propstop.wordpress.com.
Yeah. So we've known each other for quite a while. I actually got to know your brother before I got to know you. But
that always seems to be the way, even though I'm the one that started all this for Daniel at Memorabilia. For some reason, everybody's like, I talked to your Daniel about aliens in 1997. And we're talking about some big names in the industry who Daniel really helped bring through the ranks. You know, I won't name drop them now, but it is amazing how much the Short brothers have been part of this industry and part of this hobby, even though some people are like, well, I don't know anything about you. And I'm like, well, just need to watch Collector's Call, which, I've done 12 episodes on now. Just need to read the propstop.wordpress.com. And my life is, my collecting life is there, because the thing I hated about the old forums is you'd write huge amounts of information, you'd get in massive talks about props and costumes, and then one day you'd go back to it and the whole thread would be gone.
Yeah.
And that's really the reason that I started the Prop Stop up, because I just wanted my words to be there. I very, very rarely edit anything that I've ever done. I'm an actual writer by trade, English degree, but I'm really terrible at spell check. I'm really terrible at going back and seeing if the English way I say something is the American way, which gets me in trouble all the time. So yeah, as I said, the Prop Stop was designed as somewhere that I could have my thoughts about the prop community, the prop world, props, wardrobe, costumes, artwork, and I'm really proud of it. Many, many people say to me, I've read your blog. I really love it. And I'm like, can you tell people that then? Because I get no feedback. I get no information sent to me by emails or messenger, really. But people seem to love what I've done. And that's why I made it kind of my life's work to, because I love this. If anybody doesn't realize this, I love props and wardrobe.
Yeah.
It's my life's work. I denied it for the longest time. Like, the Collector's Call thing, people kept saying, you're the expert. I'm like, I'm not an expert. I just love what I do. But you can't live as long as I've lived and be intimately involved in the hobby since the age of 18, living it sometimes 12 to 14 hours a day, which totally annoys the people around me, without becoming an expert, without becoming someone who just is dyed in the wool, they say, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. But you've been collecting a lot longer than me. Like, when did it start for you?
1988. I've said this story a couple of times, but Doctor Who, went to a Doctor Who convention, went to a charity auction. It was in Clacton-on-Sea in Suffolk. I'm English. I used to live there, and I left in the mid-90s. And there was a Doctor Who belt buckle from a story called The Caves of Androzani. So big, made of plastic, made the androids from the show. It was called The Caves of Androzani. And it made the androids not shoot at you. And there it was. And suddenly my brain was like, I can't believe it. I can own something from the show that I've loved for the last, I was 18 then, so I started watching Doctor Who probably when I was 6 or 7. But never once did I ever conceive that I could buy something from the show. I think it sold for £50, which today would be like $60. I didn't buy it, but it lit a fire in me. It's like, well, I need to save up for the next convention. And then, because they supported charities, typically the BBC production office, JNT, John Nathan Turner, would send a prop or more. And then you'd get scripts, and then you'd get costume pieces. But really the big one for me was the Bonhams 1990 and 1991 BBC auction. And I really got heavily involved with Bonhams after that, helping them do authentication on some of the items that went through the auction. And one of my proud moments, I have a number of proud moments from the collecting world, but 92 or 93, they asked me, we've got an entire rack of Red Dwarf costumes, and this included the spacesuits from season 1 and the mermaid from season 2 or 3, and then there was Crichton from his first episode when he was a different actor. And they said, should we just sell this as one lot? And stupidly I went, no, you should separate everything and sell them all individually. Can you even believe that they would sell the entire season 1 and 2 as a complete rack? I mean, it probably would have gone from maybe, $400 or $500 then.
Right.
It was in pounds. So, but yeah, that was a proud moment, because then they just started using me to authenticate Doctor Who costumes that they were sent in. There was a leopard head from the Aztecs, and there was a cape from a Patrick Troughton episode called The Mind Robber. And then, Christie's called, and Phillips. And, I did the Doctor Who console room on More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS, because they'd thrown their console room away, and we'd built one for a convention. And they were like, well, we've got the console, but we need the console room. And I said, well, that's fine, but I want to be taking a photograph of me on the set at the BBC. Again, another proud moment. You're in the show, you're part of the show, and I'm very proud of so many of these things that are either accidental or came to happen because I was just in the right place at the right time.
So with the BBC then, I mean, being an American, they basically produced and aired the show, and they kept all the costumes, and it was just sort of an all-in-one sort of endeavor. And then they would basically run out of room and not know what to do with these assets. Basically,
exactly what happened with Star Trek. Exactly what happened with Game of Thrones. Exactly what happened with Power Rangers. It's like the wheel turns, and it always comes back to the beginning, just like that quote from Dune. So the BBC, they had all the stuff in the exhibitions, and then they had one storage vault in London, and then the BBC wardrobe department, that was mixed in with all the stuff that eventually, some of the things we found in 93, like John Pertwee's costume, it was labeled as a tramp. It's just, they didn't have anybody who cared about it. There was a guy from the exhibition, and then JNT, the producer, they had the keys to it all, but there wasn't someone like me. And then Andrew Beach, of course, the head of or one of the members of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, that's now the guy who does all the cataloging, everything, But yeah, it was just, we got this stuff, we don't want to pay storage on it, or we're going to knock the building down and build something like a Carphone warehouse on top of it. So they put those first costumes, it was all Blake 7, it was all Doctor Who, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and a lot of light entertainment stuff like Blackadder and Kenny Everett, and that stuff was in the 1990s Bonhams auction. And I went there, and I had no budget, $200-300, and all I kept seeing is, oh my goodness, there's Romana's pink costume from Destiny of the Daleks, and there's the space helmet from the front cover of the book of the Space Pirates, and there's Adric's costume. And what happened is a really nice couple, a fireman and his wife, I just went up to him and said, look, I don't have the money, but I would be happy to show you what racks you should buy on. My idea was very simple. It was self-serving. I would rather buy a few costumes from each rack than buy the entire rack. But now, of course, I should have bought the entire racks, because each rack sold for about £100, $120. So their total in on hundreds of costumes was probably about £1,200 $1,400. But that started the collection off. My closet at home was 85% costumes and 15% my own clothes. And it really was only like 6 foot long.
Yeah.
And, I didn't understand the concept of fashion. I still don't. Well, no, I do a little bit. But yeah, I mean, imagine the next year was the 1991 Doctor Who Bonhams auction, and they basically cleared out all that stuff. So there was literally stuff from, Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee a little bit, but Tom Baker and all them going forward until Sylvester McCoy, because we're talking 1991. The show was ended, that first run in 1989. And that was an amazing thing. My mother and my father, who I will eternally be grateful for, not only for making me, but also my mother turned to me. We went, each of us, we drove to London for Bonham's auction, and she turned to me and she said, Mark, I kind of, it makes me cry because this is the genesis of my life and everything around me. She said, Mark, I love you very much, and this is the only thing I'm going to do for you, but I'm going to give you £2,000. Run, buy what you want. I know how much this means to you, but I'm never giving you anything else again. Which was, it wasn't true. She always has, looked after me in her own way, of course, and sent us birthday presents and Christmas presents. But that was the moment when she knew this was, I don't even know how she knew. How would she know that everything that's really developed from my collection developed from that £2,000? Because I was able to buy maybe 8 or 9 lots, and I was able to take those costumes and split them up and keep one and sell a couple of them. And it was just, it was the genesis of my collecting life. Everything that I have, everything that I am, when it comes to like my collection, originates from her generosity, and I always thank them for that. It meant a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, interestingly, when I sort of made the transition from replicas to original props, as you know, I was collecting just Mystery Men stuff, and one of the first non-Mystery Men things I bought was when Hollywood Vault was doing those Hellboy auctions. And I bought this grenade belt that I was able to like screen match and everything. And back then I was putting pictures of my collection online, and this guy emailed me and he's like, hey, I want to buy that. And I was like, well, it's not for sale. And he kept pestering me and pestering me and pestering me. And then finally, just to make him go away, I said, it's, I don't remember, was it like $10,000 or something? Yeah, that, because I paid $1,000. So I told him, yeah, the price is $10,000. And he said, okay. And I couldn't believe it. He sent me like a cashier's check, and that money was used. That's how I seeded the rest of my collection when I was like really heavy in it, because I would buy stuff and then end up selling it for a lot more. And that's how I built my whole collection.
Was that, without saying a name, was that a gentleman with a name beginning with B?
It's someone I never heard from again. I don't even remember who it is. It was someone that it was just like a one-off thing, and he bought that, and then.
But that's very important, because like I posted about the Game of Thrones auctions, which we're going to get onto in a little while. I posted that I'd spent an exorbitant amount of money on paper at that auction, which of course I didn't.
Right.
We'll find out why later. But that's how this is done. So when people say, oh, you must be rich, I am like, guess what? I am the poster child for not being rich. I started in retail. My father and mother were retailers. I love them very much for teaching me the value of how to, be your own person and how to work with people. I believe that that's why I've become successful in my life, in that I understand the value of the pound or the dollar. I understand that people are, it's not just one-off deal. It should always be building a partnership. And I just love the fact that they set me up for all of this, because honestly, I couldn't work a regular job anymore. It would drive me crazy. I worked in retail for 15, 20 years. it's a people job and it's great, but everybody thinks that, you're a punch bag. And I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it and detested it at the same time. But now, with the Prop Stop and the new thing that we opened it earlier this year, the Prop Stop store, this is basically my collection I'm selling. I don't really buy in things from other sources to sell. If you buy something from me, you're pretty much buying something that is something I love. So I know my brother at Memorabilia is different. He tends to buy entire assets and liquidations and from the sources. But my stuff's much more personal. If you're buying something from me, you're buying something that I don't particularly want to sell. I'm surrounded by, I know we're hopping subjects here, but I'm surrounded by things that I never, ever, ever believed that I would own. I've been chasing a Judge Dredd from Planet Hollywood here for, probably, on paper at the auctions for 10 years. But before that, I stood in front of maybe perhaps this one, because there really aren't as many of them as people think. At the Planet Hollywood in London, it was in, the glass window there in 94, 95. And I just looked at it and said, you're going to be mine one day. And the same way when I watched the movie Judge Dredd here, this is Judge Fargo, it's played by Max von Sydow. I watched the movie. That bit when he comes out, goes into the cursed earth, is just burned into my head. And of course, thanks to the fine people at Heritage and Planet Hollywood, they sold these items a number of months ago, and I was able to win them. How was I able to win them? Let's circle back to the original part of this conversation. You let stuff go, you find things, they go for more than you bought them for, and you kind of create a collection. And every single thing that I own is built on something else that I got. No magic money, no windfalls, no winning the lottery. It's just built on the backs of the things that I've owned in the past, all of which I miss, but in an attempt to collate a collection that originally started with Doctor Who, Blake Seven, then in the 90s moved into general memorabilia, then in the 2006 I went to Christie's Star Trek auction, kind of bought what I could at that, similar to my mindset with Game of Thrones, tried to get something, and then found out literally days later the eBay, it's a wrap, Star Trek auction was going to happen, kind of jettisoned all that stuff just to buy what I knew was going to be much more reasonable amount of things, bought 2 items in a lot, sold one, kept one, just building, trying to get a piece of the pie, trying to get a collection that I was very proud of. And then, the last few years it's just been, oh my goodness me, I love Judge Dredd. Why don't I own anything from Judge Dredd? And huge thank you to Planet Hollywood there. I got my Lawgiver, hero firing Lawgiver that didn't have the gun inside, but various costumes like the Aspen Guard and the Judge Hunter, and then these incredible Planet Hollywood sales, many of which masqueraded under Heritage, or rather Profiles, which has been amalgamated into Heritage pretty much. Many of those auctions were Planet Hollywood. And I kept telling people, on the side, can't you see this is from Paris? This is from London. And people, I just don't think got it. But then, of course, they had the official Planet Hollywood auction, and that's where I was able to get him. The most I've ever spent on anything, the most I will ever spend on anything, and the thing that is, we use the word grail a lot.
Yeah.
I got it in my lifetime. I achieved my grail. It's right there. And I during the Game of Thrones auction, I had to about halfway through come down here. It was the most cathartic thing I could have done. I came around here. I touched every single mannequin. I remembered every single story. And I said to myself, what am I doing? I'm thinking of spending $20,000 on something that doesn't mean as much to me as anything down here currently. And it was very cathartic. And, I don't want anybody to think that I didn't want anything in that auction or that I was bidding on things, because there's a confusion created by myself that I was bidding on things at random and didn't really want them. And then it
Mm-hmm.
just curtailed into, no, what I was saying or tried to say, because that whole thread that I created was, you're not the only one who feels bad right now. You're not the only one who's feeling like a loser. What I was trying to say was, when I couldn't win what I wanted, my A tier, I moved to my B tier, and then I was moving to my C tier, and I was still being outbid. But we'll get onto that in a little while. But yeah, I a lot of my writing, a lot of my words are designed to invoke conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I hate people thinking that they think they're the only one out there. I know from most of my life with Doctor Who, I felt lived in a small town, some would call a village. I was the only one who liked Doctor Who there. I didn't know anybody else. I felt totally alone. I felt, there was no internet. There was no, there was phones, but, you rarely picked up the phone and talked Doctor Who. So you felt very much alone. I carry that with me even today, even though I speak to a ton of people. I always think, I wonder how other people feel about this auction. I wonder how people feel, and talking about it is the best medicine. I really appreciate everybody who got involved in that thread that I talked about on Facebook, where, I said, this is how much money I bid. This is how much money I spent, which was, as we'll discuss. But the wonderful thing about that thread is everybody else started coming out of the woodwork and said, oh, we spent 20% less than you, but we got nothing as well. And it was
Right.
so cathartic. It made me not feel like I was alone. And I just love
Well,
that we can all have these experiences with each other like that.
yeah. I mean, I think you have the benefit of having a long history in this collecting field, whereas a lot of people are newer.
Mm.
And I think sort of get a lot more caught up in the hype and just like laser focused on the now. But I think with you, you've been through a lot of big major auctions.
Mm.
And I think you have sort of a more seasoned kind of top down view of, this just having more perspective. Like people can get really excited about an auction, get disappointed that either they didn't get anything or they paid way more than they expected to.
It doesn't matter how many, oh my goodness me, thousands of items, thousands, probably tens of thousands at this point, I haven't won.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to have a mental fortitude for that,
Yeah.
because I still, like everybody else, curse in a low level way. I can't believe it. How do they have the money? Why did they take that bid at that time? Why are they not hitting the sell now button? All these things that are going through everybody's heads. It's going through everybody. None of you are alone. You're all the same people. You're all the same mindset. You all want the best. You don't want the background soldier. You still can't believe the background soldier went for 10 times more than what it should have done at any other auction. You're not alone. Nobody's alone. Sorry, I get very passionate about this stuff. It's like my mantra to put people before props,
Yeah.
It's like,
Well,
I don't care this stuff is worth a ton of money. That's not my modus operandi. Everybody likes money. We like being able to afford to buy the next prop. But the minute you forget that this stuff is all just plastic, leather, and fiberglass, you've lost the plot entirely.
yeah.
Your fellow collectors are meaningful to you. They should be celebrated, adored. You should be very proud that when someone wins, of course it hurts you didn't win something. And one of the things I will be talking about Game of Thrones is, surprise, surprise, Heritage did an incredible job. They did a fantastic, the most stable bidding platform I've ever seen. No questions about that. I got a few things I'd like them to change, but they're just my personal feelings. So I will not be attacking Heritage for what they did. In fact, if that was my stuff, I'd have been proud. The quality of the pictures, the auctioneers did a fantastic job. It's boring sitting in front of a monitor for 12 hours. 12 hours, 3 days. And yet somehow, even though we're all losing, we're still watching. So they must be doing a good job. I suspect the shipping will be kind of painful if you live out of America, but it'll be okay if you live in America. Sorry, that's just how the world of shipping is right now. I hate some of the stuff about shipping just drives me crazy. But as long as you're not operating it as a profit motive, I don't really care what you do. That's just,
Mhm.
again, every company
Yeah,
is
I
in that.
mean, I've bought every time I bought from Heritage, to their credit, I've been shocked at how low their shipping
Yeah.
costs have been. Like compared to every other auction house I've had experiences with, like their shipping is, in my experience, I mean, everything's different. I'm buying, I'm not buying giant pieces from them or anything, but it's always been very low, and the quality of how they pack things has always been very top notch. So
The Planet Hollywood catalog. I got some great catalogs. The 1991 Bonham's Doctor Who auction catalog. Um, I can't remember them all, but I'll flip to the Planet Hollywood catalog of this year. The Christie's Star Trek 2006 catalog.
mm,
These are some of the finest catalogs ever produced. In a world where we're shrinking the amount of catalogs we make because they're costing too much to ship now because they're
yep.
becoming phone books. In fact, they're bigger than phone books. But I gotta say that that Game of Thrones catalog is probably it's up. I don't know if it's number one, but I guess what I'm saying is, in no way, and I think a lot of people will expect to watch this going, "Oh, Mark's going to say something really bad about an auction company." No, Heritage Auctions is right now number one in the world. What they did and how they're doing it should be the envy of everybody else. And I'm going on the record with that. And I thank them. If I do reviews on different auction sites. I love, if anybody wants to send me the catalog, I do it on the Prop Stop. I love doing it with Heritage. I did a video on it. But I just believe in giving credit where credit's due. I'm not an attacker at random. Every time I say something controversial, what it means is this is my opinion. I'm allowed to
Yeah.
have an opinion because I'm a customer, and especially as you'll find out, a customer with Heritage, I jokingly said, "Well, I expect to get the next catalog for free," which as someone in the business, I'm getting them either because of what I've spent in the past or because I'm reviewing them, and I appreciate every single company that does that because I don't particularly want to pay for the catalog, and I know that there's a cost to it, and the shipping is exorbitant for them nowadays. So, no, I'm anybody who's ever done anything for me, anybody who's ever gone out of their way for me, anybody, and it would be impossible. The list would be thousands of people. Everybody who's ever bought anything from me, everybody who's ever contributed to something I've written and made my knowledge of the collecting world bigger. I just want to say a sincere thank you. I want to say thank you to every single one of you. I'm not going to name the names. It's impossible, and I can't choose one person over another. So you all know who you are. You all know who my customers are. You know who the people I've interacted on the phone with, yourself. I just want to say a sincere thank you because one man can't make the total difference, but by conversating and talking and by bringing light to shadow, we have improved this hobby immensely. There's still a lot of work to do, but
Mhm.
generally, this is a completely wonderful existence we're having until the Game of Thrones auction and the first Heritage Greg Jean auction, which I think they are time. What would be the word? They are changes in the prop economy. They're changes in
Mhm.
our universe, and every time you have a change that big, of course, it makes people's brains explode. So perhaps as part of our conversation today, we can kind of analyze a little bit about what's going on in our new prop economy, because there are
Mhm.
tons of people out there right now who literally are like, "What on earth happened?" Well, guess
Yeah.
what? Numbers don't lie, and I got the numbers.
Well, so staying kind of on the heritage topic, I mean, they've had some monster auctions in the last, I guess, is it even less than 2 years? Like with Greg Jean, Planet Hollywood, Game of Thrones. Like, what's sort of your thoughts on these big monster auctions that they've done?
Well, I think you just have to go to all the companies. Every company now is trying to get a piece of the pie. They're all chasing the same people.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a
There's some
cult.
pretty major gets though. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
three
it's
major auctions that everyone would die for.
absolutely. So tying that into heritage, I just said it. They're number one. $21 million on just over 900 pieces for Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
I am wearing a metaphorical hat. The hat is off.
Is that like $25,000 average per lot? I think.
Maths is not my strong point.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean it's huge numbers, because not only is it a big end number, like the prices realized per lot is just like massive.
What I don't like about auctions today is that we seem to have a day one where all the expensive stuff is, and then everything else is thrown in at the end as an afterthought.
Yeah.
I come from an era when, a $500 prop is your bread and butter for most people. And we've completely, I make the phone call. I've got this piece that's probably $3,000 to $5,000. Oh, we're not interested.
Yeah.
What?
Well, that's the new
You're
trend,
not interested,
right?
because it's too much trouble, and our numbers tell us it's not important. So it's
Right.
like, okay, what you're saying is you want stuff from Batman, Predator, Star Wars, Back to the Future, and everything else is kind of like, we don't really need it. You've got to cultivate the people you've sold to. You've got to. How many people are buying things at auctions and then calling the auction place and said, "I bought this off you for $2,000. I need to sell it," and then they get that's not part of what we're doing right now.
Right. And that's a form letter.
You're killing the goodwill.
Yeah.
It's the same with the shipping issue. People having a perception that people are making money out of shipping. It's the same with. It's just the same with all the companies are making the same mistakes. All the companies are in the same barrel. They're chasing after whales. A whale, if anybody at home doesn't know, is what we perceive as someone with a ton of money who is unbeatable. Yeah. And then with the heritage auction, the Greg Jean number one, that simple bidder number, which was I can't remember what the bidder number was. I made so much of a joke about it at the time. But there was one bidder number, and everybody in the collecting world pretty much said, it's Peter Jackson. Well, I have no idea, because we'll never know until he posts a video like Tested did 7 years ago with Adam walking around Peter Jackson's house or museum. And then, of course, we were like, profiles, Stan Winston auction. It was incredible. It was like all the pieces that you wondered, where did they go? They all went to Peter Jackson. Yeah, so naturally, we all assume that the same thing happened with Greg Jean number one. And that's weird, because Greg Jean number two, the one with all the bits and pieces that were missing pieces or weren't identified, that guy didn't show up. He didn't show up at all.
Yeah, but you can't really make assumptions though, because I found if there's a property like, let's say, Game of Thrones, and I don't have any inside information on this at all, but sometimes there are people who've never bought one thing and they'll just come in and drop a lot of money because they're a fan of that one thing. And I'm not saying that's Game of Thrones, but I've seen that in other auctions with other auction houses where there's a certain property that has captured people's imagination, and they come in and buy a lot of stuff, and maybe that's the first and last time they ever participate in an auction. You just don't know. And I think a lot of people make a lot of assumptions that, it's this big player or what have you, but you just can't really know. And it keeps growing. The hobby keeps growing, and there's always going to be new people coming into it.
Your unique perspective as you've worked in the industry. You've worked in auctions, so you know many, many things that we can only guess. So I always, I'm never going to ask about personal information, but of course we're making assumptions because we're on the outside looking in. You, for some extent, have been on the inside looking out, but also, asking questions of the community and getting feedback from people. That's a wonderful position to be in. I'm lucky I have to some extent shared that, because I've been asked by, various companies to come in and do appraisals, to do I do a lot of investigation for people. I don't
Hmm.
advertise it, but certainly people come to me and say, Mark, what do you think about this piece? And I'll
Yeah.
say, what's the auction house saying? And they'll say, well, this is new to market, nobody's ever seen it before. And because I've lived a long enough life and have a brain that doesn't remember anything apart from props and costumes, I'll say, nope, 1991, £600, that has been in the pipeline before. And people are shocked. They're like, how do you know? And I'll say, here's the auction catalog.
Hmm.
And that's something I'm very proud of, having that
Yeah.
breadth of knowledge. Sometimes I'm a little loose with the year or the numbers. I don't think anybody could not be perfect at that, but it's amazing how much stuff has been through the mill before with these older pieces, and yet people think
Yeah.
that's new to market. I'm like, nope,
Yeah. Well,
it
that's
ain't.
like your brother Dan. He put out. I remember he had that props catalog CD-ROM. I mean, that's probably like 15 plus years ago. He put that out, but there are
Yeah, no,
people out there that track
that
this
was a
stuff.
that was funny because he sold that. But the thing is, that took him
Oh yeah.
hours and days to put that thing together. Plus, there were all the auction catalogs he purchased. And
Yeah.
then I believe someone literally took that and then put that out like for
Oh
free.
really?
Yeah. How
Oh,
insulting is that?
I still have mine that I bought from him.
I always try to look at the different perspectives. Of course, I want
Yeah.
everybody to have the information, but at the same time, it wasn't gotten for free.
Yeah.
And
And a
there's
lot
a
of those
certain,
rare auction catalogs, like I know he's because I used to talk to him about it, he used to spend a lot of money on buying those on eBay and trying to find
yeah,
like
yeah.
everything. And
Well, I got to thank Tim Laws for installing my love of auction catalogs from the prop store because, of course, he
yeah.
gave me a photocopy of the Riverside 1987 studio auction, which, although not the best catalog ever, is still one of the most incredible auctions because, of course,
Which one is
so
that?
Riverside was a dumping ground for aliens, all of the aliens' armor, all of the Colonial Marines costumes, Octopussy, James Bond's Colonel Toro costume, all the background dresses, all of the villains' costumes, Romancing the Stone. No, not Romancing the Stone. The second movie that was in that series, Michael
Something the
Douglas's
Nile
white
or
suit, the
something.
Jewel of the Nile,
Yeah.
the alien spacesuit that was purchased eventually by Hard Rock Cafe. So
Was that the name of the auction house,
yeah, it was called
Riverside?
the Riverside Studio Auctions.
I never even heard
Interested
of it.
parties like yourself can go to thepropstop.wordpress.com, and guess what? I have printed in pictures that catalog, and I think
Oh,
there's a
I'll
review of
check
it
that out.
too. Now, I think I linked to it. It's on YouTube. Took a lifetime. I mean, literally 20 years. I found it maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There is a Riverside Studios news program, maybe 3 minutes long. So you see people wearing the Colonial Marine armor, and they're on a stage, and Tim and another wonderful voice from the past, David Oliver, who used to run the
Oh
Twilight
yeah.
Zone and now runs Prop Masters,
Yeah.
a solid and wonderful chap.
Love him.
Yeah, it's always been a very wonderful part of my prop world. Um, I can't remember if he went. I think both of them went, but both of them got outbid. But then we're talking like, what would a Colonial Marine go for today? Maybe like 200,000, 150,000.
Right.
Yes. Would you like a Colonial Marine? Would you like three of them for £600?
Right.
Would you like Colonel Toro from Octopussy? Would you like that for like £150? This hobby
Yeah.
is, and again, this is why we're going to be talking about Game of Thrones, because it used to be achievable. It used to be easy, even though, £600 back then was probably 2 weeks, 3 weeks work for
Mhm.
me, starting off at 18 or 19. I missed that by 1 year. I missed that auction by 1 year because I started really looking at props in 88. I would just give so much just to go back, not even really to buy anything, but just to walk around that room, touch the
Mm.
things, see the bidders. There can't have been too many of them. It was
Yeah.
literally advertised very shortly. It was kind of like a liquidation No, it was. No, it wasn't. It was Bonhams ran it. So, but it wasn't in their auction rooms. I think it was in the studios.
Okay.
I mean, amazing, amazing.
Was this pre-prop store?
Well, Stephen Lane, I walked into Cheshunt, one of the collector fairs, and it was probably about 1992, 93, and he had a table there. I think he had a Batman. There was a Batman storyboard and a few little props. And I kind of looked to my side and went, seen that stuff before. And then many, many, many years later, Stephen Lane became quite an important part of the prop community.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
But I will say about Stephen is there is a gentleman who has achieved what most of us could only dream of.
Oh, yeah.
He has started a company from the ground up, because he started off going to the studios, as you may have heard, where he would make the signage, I believe, for like Saving Private Ryan. So he started off small, like we all did, and he built, and he brought Tim Laws in, who is just another exceptionally fine chap who I've got nothing but good memories of doing things with him in 93, 94, 95 before I left for America. And the most enviable, most incredible company that has helped so many collectors out, that has brought so many pieces to the market. And again, someone else I take my metaphorical hat off to for being such an important part of the hobby and contributing so much. You know, it's a business, but I really feel that the people who've done well in this business love the props. They love what they've done and how they've contributed to it. And the people who do that, I got all the time in the world for.
Yeah. Well, and I think people kind of take for granted the fact that they include COAs with their lots that they sell, and that's a big deal, and they also stand behind it. It's not just like a piece of paper for them, you know.
Yeah, COAs though has become the bane of our hobby because everybody wants one. Most people want the one from Prop Store, and at the end of the day, there are people who find these things before they put them in Prop Store. I wish more people understood that the piece of paper is important. But I spent many, many years writing out complete letters of how I found the thing, sometimes who I found it from, but we all know that our contacts are important to us, and the minute we let that contact out, suddenly we lose it to someone else. So I like the idea of the COA. I just wish the COA was more of a letter of authenticity. The history,
letter of provenance.
And there's been way too many auctions where that information has been supplied to an auction house, and that letter is dumped in the bin, and their COA applied, and all that history is lost. And I don't like that as part of the hobby. I really, truly believe that so much of these pieces that I love is because I know the history, I know where it came from, how things were made, and I having a piece of paper with a photograph on and a line item, this is this from this and this date, that's kind of lame, isn't it? It's
well, I think there's kind of two sides of it, because the alternative is typically that there's nothing. So to me, but at least they're standing behind the authenticity of it. And the other sort of challenge is, they're an auction house and there is history that comes with items, but to what degree can they kind of vet and affirm that in terms of like every detail? Because I love the idea of a letter of provenance, but if things have changed hands a bunch of times, what them or any other auction house puts in writing, then they're standing behind every fact that's in that letter, and it could be 90% accurate and 10% inaccurate. So it is. I see both sides of it. So at the same time, I agree with you, but being pragmatic and looking at it as a business, I don't know if it's achievable unless the letter of provenance is written by someone that's part of the past chain of ownership, or some principal from the production, or some kind of an authority that stands on its own rather than Um,
But that's what
you
I'm
know,
saying, that the previous owner, even if you
mhm,
don't take it all as read, that is part of the history of the piece. And so I'm looking not at one particular company here. I'm taking every single
mhm.
company and
Yeah.
and saying that. But one of the things that I've done, I've never deleted anything off the propstop.wordpress. So if I've owned something and I've written about it,
Mhm.
it'll always be there. There's a wonderful, like the Hunger Games leather jacket that I found, like the Lost in Space robot that I pieced together, many of the pieces I bought from Prop Store, the Batman cowl I have. Many of those pieces I've dissected all the information, put it on the Prop Stop. That to me is like a letter of authenticity or even
Mhm.
words of authenticity. They will always be there, I hope. And that was the point of the Prop Stop for me, that my words would never be able to be deleted from, like a thread, that the history that when I've touched something, it'll always be there. And and
Yeah.
and I love that. I love that more than anything because, owning something and passing those words on is really important to me. Whether sometimes you get it wrong, sometimes you get given the wrong information.
Yeah.
But there it is, warts and all.
Yeah. Well, I think it's kind of two separate things. There's, ideally there would be letter or letters and supporting documents strictly about provenance. And then there's some form of certifying authenticity. So if like the provenance ends up being incorrect or there's a mistake or someone is defrauded or something, it's important that people have the assurance that if they can demonstrate that it isn't what it was sold as, they can have some form of recourse and get their money back. So,
Yeah, I can't think of too many examples of that, but I often wonder if someone has a problematic piece and they go back to the source how they're handled. I know some companies are good about that, and I know some companies aren't good at all. So yeah, I always wonder about that. But no, excellent points. There should be a COA. It's just that
mhm.
to me, it maybe has a little bit more information on it.
Yeah. Yeah. The other wrinkle I've seen is there have been examples in the past I'm aware of where, let's say, someone bought something 20 years ago and they go back to an auction house and prove that they were wrong, it's not authentic. And then the auction house gives them their money back. But then they're like, yeah, but I bought that 20 years ago for $1,000 and today it'd be worth $30,000.
That's
But
ridiculous. If you bought
exactly.
something at the price that you paid for it,
Yeah.
you bought something for $2,000 and you have a receipt for what you paid for it. Guess what? You're getting $2,000.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous.
But some people think they should get whatever like sort of the current market value is
Well,
rather
they're
than what
wrong.
they actually pay. Yeah.
So, shall we talk about Game of Thrones?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, as I said,
Pretend that the people watching this have no idea of what your opinion and experiences are. I know you've written about it on the forums and
no,
your
that's what
site
I was
and
going to do.
everything.
And number one is I don't blame Heritage at all for any of this. In fact, I've already gone out of my way to make sure they realize that they did an amazing and excellent job. So I hope as a company or as an individual there, they don't suddenly go, what the hell? Because that's not what I'm going to say. What
Mhm.
I'm going to say is there's a new prop economy. As you rightly point out, there's people out there, they have no knowledge about props, but boy, do they have a lot of money.
Mhm.
And they're going to be a problem going forward because I'm putting us as kind of us versus them. I'm a collector, you're a collector, a lot of the people on the forums are collectors, and they had a wake up. And it was kind of like the one that happened at Heritage with Greg Jean, where basically I sat there clicking the button, and then I said, well, that's what it's worth in my head, and it would
Mhm.
go for 10 times that. And I just, what to say on the thread and here is you're not alone. This is a horrible feeling to have. Um, you're all asking. So let's set up the auction. Obviously, the studio and the exhibition. There's been an exhibition for 5 years. It's like $29.99 to get in, and apparently they decided to sell the parts that were either no longer part of the exhibition or weren't, as my friend James at the HSPPA says, not of exhibitable value. which usually means if you've got two, we want to get rid of one and we'll keep the other one. And that means we had things in that auction where there's no breastplate for it, but there's an undersuit, because breastplate you just clean off at the end of filming, and the costume might get dirty, so you need to have another costume, or you could have a stunt or a photo double. And if anybody was watching that auction thinking that, there's the one and only, I'm sorry. There are, even in TV that has a reduced budget, there is a hero. There may even be a hero 2. There's a stunt. Very rarely a stunt 2. There's a photo double. And sometimes there's an extra. So TV is different to film. In film, you can have up to, well, you can't even give a number, but it's like Elysium. What we found with that when VIP Fan Auctions, a brilliant company that I'm very proud to be associated with, doing authenticity and putting some of my items in their auctions and buying from them. Wonderful company. They did the auction for Elysium, the Matt Damon 2013 film. So Kruger, played by Sharlto Copley, 9 costumes. My brother, Daniel, from PopCultureKind, he bought nearly all the costumes to get the best one. And what he discovered is like only 1, maybe possibly 2 of all those were ever on screen, because screen matching is something that he does incredibly well. I'm a late member to that party. I remember arguing with you and other people on the forums in the early 2000s the importance of screen matching. I was like, who does that? That's crazy. And now I'm really a convert to it, because you don't want to have the piece that was not used on screen, because it's probably just the one that was kept in case the other one got damaged. Although I'm a big proponent in stunts. I think stunts have a value which are very much too low in the market. I'm like, well, when they're swinging the sword, typically if you don't see their face, that's the stunt guy. So guess what? That's the sequence you remember from the film. Why wouldn't you want the stunt? Everybody's like, no, I want the hero. It's like, well, that's not really used that much. I mean, props wise, in close-ups, but your hero costume is going to be on screen, whenever they're talking. So yeah, sorry about that. I've gone off the subject. But anyway, the bottom line is that with the Game of Thrones auction, it was definitely surprising. And the auction house obviously was picked as Heritage. I'm sure every single auction house in the world went for that one, or they should have done, especially with the results. But we all knew it was going to do well. We just didn't know how well it was going to do. So those items got sent all over the world. Then we had the auction. We all made our plans up on our notepads, and that's going to go for 2,000, and that comparatively that's going to be 10. And then we woke up that day and our world's melted down, because things that in the past would have gone for $3,000 went for 30. And I know for myself, I had an A list, a B list, and a C list, and you all try for the A, but when I saw one of the Golden Army background soldier costumes that should have gone for 1,500, 2,003, in my mind, comparing to like The Last Witch Hunter, comparing to Warcraft maybe, which is an outlier because that stuff went high, but smaller productions that you feel kind of might be the same kind of thing. And then people went, well, I got to get something. And that just started, and as I said, the numbers here don't lie. So what happened in that auction? Let's analyze that, even though I'm probably skipping around some areas I should be.
Well, so I kind of was going in and out of it. I didn't sit through the whole thing, but I sort of, was multitasking. I'd dip in, dip out. And one thing I've noticed with heritage auctions, at least with maybe not as much with props, but with comic books and comic art and things like that, and some toys, is typically what I've noticed is the pre-bidding the day before, like usually what it takes it to in the live auction is about double.
It was very low, wasn't it? Everything.
But with Game of Thrones, that rule did not apply at all. It just, because everything was still relatively low like the day before.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was almost like people were waiting to pounce and like trying to convince people, well, we can't bid early because we will alert too many people. Right. What I believe the real reason for that is that the people who bid high
We're on the phone.
probably hadn't bid in prop auctions before.
Yeah.
So many of the things that we take for granted in other auctions no longer applied. So that was number one, as you rightly say. You can tell early on with these auctions what's going to happen. And I always recommend to people, if you want something from the auction, for goodness sake, bid in the first 50 lots. Because once people start getting made aware or wake up,
the trends, manifest
or the minute
themselves.
one piece, if you've got 10 armors, one thing's for definite. The first one is technically going to go the cheapest, and the one at the end is going to go most of the time the most expensive, unless everybody else has already got one by the time you get the end. Your midpoint is the middle. This auction, it didn't apply. Well, it did. The first one did go the cheapest, but then it got higher and higher and higher. The Lannister armor is a great example of that.
I saw that.
I don't have specific examples on my sheet here. What I wanted to do with my analysis last night is something that I should have already done. I've just been lazy because it's a lot of work. I went to the YouTube videos on Heritage's YouTube page, and they have all 3 days of the auction, 12 hours. So I went through on fast forward, and I picked out, first of all, I did the first 50 items, and I did the first 74 total. So here is why this auction went the way it did. The first, let me look here. So the first 50 items, right? I'm not going to bore you with, or this went for that, and this is just like, to me, what I call the hard numbers. 7101. So the way they do it is 101 is your first bidder. So whoever won the first item, which was the White Walker statue, 7101 is not his bid number. It's the number associated with that bidder when they win something. So if you then go to lot 3, Stark Soldier Ensemble, he won that lot too, 7101. So and sometimes it's really hard to hear. So later in the auction, the woman was repeating it back. The auctioneer was repeating it back. That's when I heard it. So I have some of these lots here that I don't have the guy who won it. I would much prefer, that's one of the things I want them to do. I want them to tell us the bidder number, not because I'm being nosy per se, but I just think you should know, as a kind of a strategy, you should know kind of if someone's bidding on a lot of stuff. I don't particularly want to know who it is. I just want to feel like I know something going through an auction that just makes me feel better that I'm not bidding against air.
You need therapy.
No, I don't need therapy. What I need is because it's worth it, and I'll explain why. Right. So the lot, I've done the first 50 lots, as I said. Would you believe lot 7, bidder number 7101 bought 10 items of those 50 items? And lot 7, bidder 7109, he won 14 lots. So using your maths, that's 50% of all the lots in the auction were bought by 2 people. I surmise that those 2 people were probably bidding against each other at all the higher levels and spreading this stuff out between them. So all of the lots that are any good, pretty much, on the paper, all of the lots that went over, say, 3 or 4 grand, there's a few, like, I didn't put an amount next to it, so I can't tell you. But there was I think it was like a wall hanging. It went for 30 grand. That went to a new bidder. Every time you get a new bidder, that would be 7107. The next bidder after that would be 7108. Every time you get a new bidder, they only repeat it when they buy something else, which I didn't actually get. I had to kind of wrap my head around that. The first 50 lots in the item, 50% of it was bought by 2 people, and that did not change throughout the rest of the auction. So what happened? All of us, I'm not calling the entire prop community plebs, I'm calling myself a pleb. All of us plebs, i.e. me, we're sitting there thinking we got a chance, and we're just picking up all the scraps, the background soldier, sword, the C tier character, all the good stuff was being picked up by relatively 2 people. And of course that meant that I personally, and here's the the big number that some of you may know. I personally bid $650,000 with taxes and bidding. Well, that was with buyer's premium. It was $860,000.
So you're talking about your highest, if you added up your highest.
Yeah. So in some cases, a soldier, I bid 3,000 and the thing went for 30,000. So it only counts the bid that I made. Only one item was I the underbidder on. One item, and I bid on 90 to 100 lots, I believe. And with my $650,000 in bids, I won nothing.
Were all of your bids live?
Yes. I did not bid beforehand. I bid during the auction. I did not have amounts I bid. No, I did not make bid amounts that I thought I would go to. It was all kind of on the fly. It was just to the items that I had on my list. That they were things like Lannister soldiers, every single one of those. It was like, if I don't get that one, then I'll go for that one, and I won't go for the last one. So I didn't have that on my bid list because the last one always goes for more. There was important characters. There was. I don't want to fill my house with background pieces. I can't believe most collectors would not want to do that. So to me, as long as I came out of this with maybe 2 pieces, I would be happy, even though my list went originally from 90 pieces down to 50 pieces down to 20 pieces. But during the middle of the auction, it was like, I just got to get something. And that was still within those A to C tier of things. I didn't just randomly go, I need to go for that because it's only $1,200. I never did that. And every single piece I wanted, and as I said, only one piece in the auction was the direct underbidder. Like, if that guy doesn't pay, they'll contact me. Many of the other items, I was literally at between 30 and 40% of what it sold for. So I really didn't affect the auction in any way other than that I was just one of what they say is 4,500 people bidding on that auction, and I was probably in the lower 35 percentile.
So they had 4,500 individual distinct
That's what
bidders.
They put out there, that they had 4,500 individual bidders, many of whom have contributed to Facebook forums and comments that we've made where they said, yes, I too spent $400,000 on paper and I won nothing. And then there's some people who, one gentleman, I believe, who bought Daenerys's dress, he spent $33,000 on it.
Yeah.
And, that, I think he's even said that that's a 6-month payment plan for me. He'll probably be eating ramen noodles for the rest of his life. Right. And, it's just, I'm not going to ever put myself in that position. I've spent the most I'm ever going to spend on anything in my life right there. And even so, that was the deal of the century. That was half of what a comparable one had sold for within the last 5 years. And I love being the one who can say, like, I've got 2 things in my collection that I can 100% tell you are the cheapest that were ever sold. I got a Warcraft Knight, cheapest one ever sold. Found it on iCollector way after the auctions, and I thank him very much, because the same thing at Game of Thrones happened to me at Warcraft at Prop Store. 2 or 3, there was 2 people in that auction that changed that auction for everyone, because they were buying multiple lots. One guy was buying, I think, 10 to 15 suits of armor, and he took them across the sea and had an amazing collection. But when you do that, you skew the auction, because now everybody's chasing these items below, and then it just brings the average just climbs, and then you start getting the panic buying and the panic bidding. And I for one don't think for 1 second that people were, there wasn't anybody like bidding on stuff they didn't want. I don't. There's a few times in history we've seen that. I've been the victim of it too. I'll get a second chance offer and I'll say, well, that went for 4. Why are you offering me that for 1,000 now? The ones I don't like, and there's no one in the world that won't agree with me here, is when something's bid to 4 and they say, well, actually, sir, that'll be the underbidded amount, and it'll be like 3,800, and you'll say, well, no, the same guy who didn't pay at 4, he bid me up from 1.
Yeah, that's a problem.
If that ever happens to any of you guys out there, you stand your ground on that, because that's just not right. And I have real big problems with anybody who wants to I'm trying to find the right word. That's not a bad word. Anybody who wants to auction interference.
Yeah.
There's been some big ones in the last 20, 25 years. You'll call a company up and they'll say, yeah, this guy didn't pay for that and didn't do this. And, back then you could check. And it's something I wish Heritage would do. This is a plea to you, Heritage. Please, please, please. I hated bidding against air.
Yeah.
Please put a bidder number on the screen, because when it just says internet buyer or when it says Heritage, I'm not trying to, even though I've done that in my life, I'm not trying to find out who that person is. I really don't have any interest in that whatsoever. I just want to feel that when I bid, I'm bidding against a real person.
Yeah.
And this has been a real problem. eBay used to be fantastic. 20 years ago, you'd have the buyer name there. You'd have some kind of feeling that you were bidding against a real person. So if I made any plea here to any auction company, this is not said to get information that's propriety. It's not said to track people down. I don't want to do that. I just want to feel I'm bidding against a real person who's going to pay for it.
Yeah.
That's a plea from my heart. That really is, because it's just something that really has gotten worse over the years. So
yeah. Well, the problem with the non-paying bidder, and your point that they're usual, when then they go to the underbidder, the non-paying person is probably, as the two of them going up to whatever the hammer price was. But the problem is, it's really sad for the consignor, because if that person didn't interfere, like, you don't really know what would have happened, because maybe there is someone else that would have taken it up that far and they didn't, because someone who later decided not to, make good on their bids just walks away. So it's really a lose-lose, like, for everybody.
It's just interfering so much with I've got many, many specific examples. I'm not going to do it. As I've gotten older, one of the things that I found is people think that I'm like, Mark gets angry and he says things. And, the truth is, the internet makes us all way too brave. But it also, I don't say things that I don't have an accountability for. And I also will happily admit when I'm wrong.
So going back to your other point,
have a conversation about things is what I'm saying.
Yeah, going back to your other point, like with Heritage, I've noticed this with some auctions. I don't know if this is true across all prop auctions now. Maybe you can tell me. Is it seems like they're moving towards either starting at basically nothing or starting at whatever the reserve is, rather than chandelier bidding to like an unstated reserve, which is usually like a lowest amount.
The idea that you start at 50 grand and then if you don't get any bids, the thing goes unsold is annoying. And it's not the right way to do it, because anybody like myself, if I send something to an auction house, I want it gone. Do you know why? It was hard enough for me to sacrifice that piece that when I get it back and then I'm told that nobody is interested in it, that just sucks. It's like a wet fish in the face. So I'm well known with auction companies that I have very fair reserves, if any. And I always say, well, I think I'm constantly told, it's like, I want it gone. So that's how you got to be. And another piece of advice for people putting multiple things in an auction. Here's something I tell everybody. You put 10 things in an auction, right? You're going to lose on a couple. You're going to be disappointed. It's going to hurt. It's going to be like, ouch, I lost $1,000 on that. This market is just like the car market and memorabilia market. As we age out, one day, nobody's going to give a flying for this piece. As people age out, Laurel and Hardy become less important. Buster Keaton. It's like Ford, 1911 cars. They are not as important to the younger generation who all want Mustangs now and, the hot 1987 Lamborghini or whatever. The bottom line is this stuff is aging out. As people get older and die off, there will be things that nobody cares about anymore. It is a horrible thought to have, but it's true. So what I'm saying is right now, the 1990s is very hot. but sooner or later, the 70s and the 60s will not be as hot, like Batman and all that. Although you can't use Batman because everybody wants it. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about at home. So what was your question again? I've diversed off
Well, I have a follow-up question. So as the market keeps increasing in terms of valuations, and you talk to a lot of people and you're very involved on the forums, like, what's your perception in terms of percentages of people who are therefore starting to collect things that are maybe less hot versus people who are just, or versus the people who are now saying, oh, you know what, I'm just going to save up my money and get less and maybe lower tier stuff, but of properties that are like more popular, like Star Wars and
everybody has been moved into this higher and higher category. But the truth is, most collectors are still in this $500 range. Daniel, Memorabilia right now has these amazing, sometimes $1 or $10 auctions where he's selling, items from tons of different things, Lost in Space and Once Upon a Time, and so many different things. And that should be the bread and butter of a collector. But everybody's been pushed in. You must have a Stormtrooper helmet. You must have a long claw. You must have even if it's silly, you must have the cover of the almanac from Back to the Future. Do you have any idea how many of those were made? Back in 1993, when I first got to LA, that's a $100 to $200 piece that was in the cabinet of a memorabilia store, and it was sold as a backup. How many of those backups now are hero? How many of those things have been sold for tens of thousands of dollars? I'm here to tell you, guess what? Those are so overpriced. But everybody has the perception that I've got to have the best of the best. And I'm telling the market, you can have a mix of stuff. You don't just need to have, as Tim used to say, I need to have 3 things in my collection and that's it. I've got 300 pieces. It would be impossible for me to get, as much as I say it should be, should it be my Warcraft armor? Should it be, my Judge Dredd? And it's impossible. I love everything. But the market has definitely put its foot down on these sub $500 pieces. It's made them uncool, and that's silly. Because that's the bread and butter of how you bring new people into the hobby and how you continually raise people up. But now you're getting people, they come right in and they're like, I want a hoverboard. And it's like, do you want the hoverboard that went for 400,000? Or do you want the hoverboard in the next auction that went for 75? And it only takes, as we all know, one person to get you up to that 400. So what's the value of something? The value of something is what anybody places on it. And unfortunately, that means that, we have $200,000 suits of armor Game of Thrones auctions where, any other auction, any other time, different product, different movie would have gone for, what we were ready to pay, 20, 30, even then, because to me, it's like insane, but it's what most people assumed it would go for.
Yeah. So on the horizon, what's another big property that could do what Game of Thrones did? Is there one?
So I just want to switch over to something. So when the Warcraft auction happened in 2018, I was devastated. I didn't win anything. Daniel, keep saying his name, my brother, good man, but he said to me last night, the problem with all these props podcasts, we never show props. They're in the background, but, we talk about props. So anyway, I bought a few props here for my show and tell. A couple of cups I just dropped on the floor. Thankfully, they're made of cardboard. Anyway, so all the people that say you're never going to own anything, this is the main rubber stunt sword for Lothar from Warcraft. I was devastated at the end of that. A friend of mine won a very expensive suit of armor, but most of us guys, it was just like, the first armor went for 4,500, and then the next armor went for like 6, and it went to 8. And then, I'm a creature of habit. When something sells for 4, and then you're asking me to pay 8, guess what? I shut down. I'm like, I should have bought the first one. I still bid, but in my head, I'm like, what am I doing? I should have bought the first one. It's too late. It's gone. But anyway, just to make you guys feel at home good, I now own one suit of regular soldier armor. I now have the Hero Lothar armor, one of the most expensive pieces in the auction that I did a trade on. I have all 4 swords, a shield. Anyway, here's the thing. Just like the Game of Thrones auction, I want to give you guys hope. I didn't think I was ever going to own anything from Warcraft. And through the kindness of people, fellow collectors, people who were like, I need to trade this, I need to get something different, put it in an auction, whatever. I now have an enviable Warcraft collection that makes me so happy. So all you people out there right now, I got great news for you about Game of Thrones. There will be another auction because there has to be. They had 900 pieces. They made $21.5 million. If you don't think everybody at HBO the next day had a conference call, got around the table and said, we've got enough for 5 auctions. If you don't, and because the other thing is, it's $30 to get into the exhibition. It would take 700,000 people to walk through the exhibition to make $21.5 million.
Well, plus their cost of running an exhibition, which is
exactly. And
huge.
Then also the fact that apparently, everything has a finite time. So Game of Thrones has been done for 5 years. There's got to be less people going there now than there was. Anyway, the bottom line is, if you don't think that they all sat around that table and said, part 2, part 3, they're coming, then you're absolutely silly. There will be another one. 100% know it in my heart. There were some good hero pieces in the auction. But as several people who went there and looked at some of the items, they're sitting on everything for the exhibition. Not only that, they're sitting on all the stuff that was background and extra soldiers. And, I would say if you saw 10 Lannister soldiers in the auction, there's at least another 30 or 40 in the warehouse. And I would say go on to that. There's a video, I think, where the guy, Kit Harington, took you through the warehouse 5 years ago and showed you everything. That's your key. Let's look at all that stuff. So anyway, just to close the Game of Thrones thing off, I know it seems awful right now. I'm disappointed as everybody else, even though I'm on to the next auction, which we'll talk about. The original question you asked. But, with Warcraft, I now feel I can close that book. I have everything I ever wanted. I got it for a fraction of the price. And I thank every single person out there who helped me achieve that. Either in the industry or fellow collectors, you all know who you are. And just thank you. Because like Judge Dredd, I am now running out of, not everything's a grail, but I'm running out of things that I always wanted. There's one thing coming up in the next couple of months that I literally believe, because I haven't seen any movies for years now where I went, oh my goodness me, I really want that. I'm actually of the point now that I actually think that I can close this book to an extent. I mean, I'm always going to be bidding. I'm always going to be interested. But if I get the thing, and it will be in Heritage's Power Ranger auction, something else that I've been trying to get now for a long time, then I feel that the book's kind of closed. And maybe I'll sell some of the lesser important things, but I would like to get it down to about 30 things. It would please me very much. My wife is an amazing woman, and she has given me the access to the basement to use, which you'll see on Collector's Call if you watch that episode with me and James of the HSPPA. You'll have a good idea of my collection and the things that I love. But yeah, it's Power Rangers. I would ask you, Jason. I have spent the last week thoroughly indoctrinating myself well, I only really knew the movie and the TV show, the first one. I was in Northridge, California in 1993 visiting prop people. And would you believe I was in the Northridge Quake lining up for Power Ranger action figures to take home to England because they weren't available yet in England. And the Northridge Quake happened at 4:15 in the morning. The swimming pool and the travel lodge on Santa Monica Pier came into my the swimming pool came into my room. The TV shot off the rack, and then we all went to this toy shop in Santa Monica expecting there to be 9 a.m. Power Rangers toy sale. And of course we were told quite sensibly at 6 a.m. Yeah, that's not going to happen. The buildings have all fallen down.
Wow.
But yeah, I would love to do as many people on YouTube have already done, but they say they don't have any prop knowledge. They're all sitting there thinking they're going to buy a Power Ranger suit for $400-500. They're all
Right.
thinking that the actors who currently right now are all complaining, "Oh, I should have got a suit. I was on the show."
saw that.
Guess what? They're not getting that for $800. They're
No.
insane. I mean, no disrespect, but yeah, you're insane. You're not getting a Power Ranger suit for $500 to $800. I do plan. You heard it here first. I do plan to be at Heritage for that auction, if nothing to eat the snacks off their trays. And also, I'm going to help them. I'm going to help them really, really well, because I would like a couple of things from the auction, and those things in the auction that I want to bid on, I will make sure that they start off at a sensible price, so we don't have to sit there for 3 or 4 minutes waiting from the lot to go from $500 to $3,000. So I promise some people out there that things that I want to bid on, I will be bidding them to the appropriate price early on. That sounds like I'm challenging my fellow collectors. It is not. It's just that when I went to Star Trek Christie's, people really appreciated the fact that when you wanted something, you just started it off where you felt it was valued at. And I would encourage people, because you can't do that on Heritage. You can't say, "Oh, I want to bid 4,000 now," just to move the auction along. You have to go. Okay, they go 200, 300, 400. I'm like, how much time could we spend here not being at this computer if they just let me put a bid in? So one of the great things about being in that room is that I can just put my sign up and say 2,000. So I look forward to doing that and saving everybody a ton of time.
So
yeah, I'm really excited about Power Rangers. Very excited. So I've done the deep dive. I've got the music going off in my head like 24/7 right now. It's really hurting me. And I know everything about Power Rangers that you could possibly want to know, including the stuff I don't want. I just wanted to really deep dive into it. So that would be a fantastic episode to do with you.
So I've never seen a single episode of Power Rangers. and I haven't looked at the auction. Like, how many lots are there, and sort of what range do you think it's going to do really well? Because I just have no frame of reference.
It's not going to do Game of Thrones money.
No.
Looking at previous prices and stuff, you can see that there's a love for the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the 3 series from 93 to 95.
And it has property it has that whole historic property in this auction too.
Not as much, because much of that over time has been sold.
Didn't get saved, yeah.
So obviously, as you get through the last 25 years, the newer it is, the more of it is. But even so, I still don't believe that everything they've got is here. There's no civilian clothing. Many of the monsters with my research were destroyed that were from like the first 10 years. They actually said they shredded them all because they were just filling the warehouse and rotting. So many of those older monsters are either sold off through Disney or in this were destroyed, shredded, which I know every time I hear that word, it just does my brain in. But storage space is the reason why these auctions happen, because it costs X amount per square foot, and eventually the new guy comes in and says, we don't need all that stuff anymore, that's gone. Because the guy in charge of Power Rangers for many years really was a huge fan of it, and he really helped the show. Anyway, so the first 3 seasons and the movie are going to be big money. And then as I think you'll go through, because what happens is every few years it resets. You get new actors in, you'll get different things. So one series will be about dinosaurs being Power Rangers. The next one will be, like space Power Rangers. The next one will be ninja, samurai. And they essentially use the thing of, the 5 heroes, the guy that controls the heroes, and a villain. And then, as much as you think that these shows would all be always the same, they really aren't. And I certainly have love for certain seasons, and especially with a not an unlimited budget, like nowhere near an unlimited budget. I've got.
So it sounds a lot like Doctor Who.
Yeah.
In terms of it, there's a new doctor, and they sort of change things up, and
it's totally not like Doctor Who, but it is. So I would completely agree. But, the Power Rangers always got a leotard, always got a jumpsuit, always got a helmet. always have different weapons, guns. The interesting thing is, though, that the Japanese footage, so they use American footage and Japanese footage.
Yeah.
And then you can see the Japanese footage because for a long time it was very downgraded. And then they'd try to match it. But you could always see what was filmed in different countries. And then when they'd finished with those suits, they'd send them to America and then they'd patent new suits, or they'd use the old monster or the Zords, which are the robot creatures that they pilot. They would send those models over to America. So this is the first official auction. It's about 600 to maybe 650, around about that number, items. It goes through all the different shows. There's about 400 Ranger costumes. I think there will be prices all over the place, but I guarantee you it's going to be like 2,000 to 3,000 on the bottom end for the Rangers, which, you know, no Power Rangers fans are going to want to hear that. They're all thinking they're getting one for $500. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. It's not people like me. It's going to be you guys all fighting out. So there's going to be a mix of collectors. There's going to be toy collectors. There's going to be movie prop collectors. And my advice would be, don't be married to a specific show. If you just want something, get the one that seems the cheapest, because otherwise you're going to end up like Game of Thrones. You're not going to own anything. And I'm just so excited about that. I'm not a dyed-in-the-wall Power Rangers fan, but it's always followed my collecting life. I saw Judge Dredd and Power Rangers, the movie, in 1995, the same day. I went and saw Power Rangers first and then Judge Dredd. And yes, I was very disappointed the minute Judge Dredd took his helmet off and the movie isn't as good as the first 15 minutes, but it's become my thing. Judge Dredd, I love the design. I love just love the concept. I love it all. And then one of the Power Rangers is very Judge Dredd. So that's one of the shows that I'm very interested in. I knew nothing about it, but that whole season is very Judge Dredd. So that's probably something I'd want something from. And then the movie as well, as I said, I went to see that movie. It was a time in my life where collecting was very important for me. So those are the things that I'm going to concentrate on. And then I really hope after that I get to have some time off, because yes, as James would say, this is an obsession. It's an obsession for all collectors that we all get something new. The thing you bought last time is never enough. You always want to get the next thing. But I really would, to an extent. A couple of other things I bought. So this is Captain Power. I spent 10 years in Canada looking for anything from Captain Power. I now have the biggest Captain Power collection in the world. You'll have seen on Collector's Call, which I'm very proud to have been associated with Lisa Welchel on MeTV. We've done about 12 episodes with me on that, and it's been a pleasure to interact with all those collectors. So Captain Power, I had the XT7 Jet. I've got one of the soldier costumes. I've got two of the Captain Power.
Is that based on the toy line?
Yes. So 1987, Mattel did a toy line where you'd point the jet at the TV, and the TV episode would shoot back at the jet, and your guy would eject out of the cockpit. So I actually have the original screen-used model of that XT7 jet that many of you probably had as a kid. But no, the point of this is I found this was a great forum and a great place to say thank you. So I've got all of the Captain Power, even including the turkey. It's like a turkey tray that they fiberglassed and put some oxygen tanks on the back of. It's like a photo double or a stunt version of his backpack. So I'm going to use that on the final build. I've gotten really into making mannequin displays. So I'll use a foam mannequin and I will put my armor and costumes on that, and it works so much better than a store-bought mannequin or one you can get on eBay. So Captain Power is the next one I'm going to do. As you can see, this is fiberglass, painted foam. I got this from one of the stunt guys who worked on the show and had literally kept it because he was given it as part of a transaction on the final day of production. Something I looked for a long, long time, but I do want to say a thank you to Serge, Christopher Adam, and James Sleeth. So because the helmet is nowhere, I had seen Serge, Christopher, had made a cosplay helmet. And when I put out to the collecting world on the Captain Power forum, he very kindly made me a 3D print of his helmet that he made. And then James is going to chrome this in the same way that the other one is chromed.
Oh, cool.
And the reason I want to publicly acknowledge him is it's just so, unlike sometimes on the prop forums, everybody on the Captain Power forum has just been so kind. I said it was my kind of life's dream to have this statue done for next year, which is the anniversary. And as much as I would love to take this statue to show it to Tim Dunnigan, who played Captain Power, I don't think that's going to be possible. But I did want to have this mannequin with all the armor and the undersuit done. And both those two gentlemen, they made that dream come true. James is going to be chroming this, and we've got the visor for it and the aerial and everything. And I just wanted to publicly say thank you to those two gentlemen, because, you know, we're all in this together at the end of the day. They did it for free, minus the shipping. And I mean, the people who step up in our community and do things like that or want to help and have no other reason for doing it other than they just want to be, an assist. They want to be a good force in our hobby. Again, I want to say thank you to all of them. And I had a couple of other pieces, since I know I got the words of my brother in my head saying, show more props off. I've got the Lost in Space 1997. This is from the Planet Hollywood stuff that was available.
Oh, cool.
And this is the working. John Robinson uses this to pierce the Spider Smith. And it has the working function in it, which I love. So I got that. And then the thing that I first remember ever seeing on screen when I was Battlestar Galactica, the movie. It was made from 2 episodes of the TV show, and they showed it in England. And this is the cannon that circles and shoots at the Cylon ships. This is the Galactica upper cannon. There was only one of these made. It was kit bashed within an inch of its life. I first saw it when it was offered to me. It was like this, and I was like, I have no idea what that was. And the minute that the gentleman sent me a picture of the underside, I was like, oh my goodness me. And then, of course, once it's like that, there's a cannon. There's a cannon that fires up, and that's a completely different design. All on the prop stop, you can see that all there. And then, so that is from the very first thing. Not even Star Wars, not even Superman. The first prop that I have a visual remembrance of seeing in a cinema and like carried through with me was this gun emplacement. And again, thank you very much, gentlemen, who let me have this. I told him at the time how much this meant to me. I really appreciate you letting that come to my collection, because the thing that you remember from your youth, the thing you remember from the favorite movie you had, I got them. And you know, the another thing, the RoboCop gun. So this is the Hero opening RoboCop gun, which is a non-firing one. But that again is something that followed me to the collection. And as I said, my Judge Dredd stuff behind me, they're all part of what makes this hobby so incredibly fun. And I'm so grateful that I got to share that with you today and your audience. I'm very excited for your podcast. I've watched the wonderful episode with the gentleman, Martin Young, his amazing collection that I think we've only managed to look at the surface of, but what a fascinating gentleman. And also yourself. You know, you've had a great long run in this hobby. I certainly think that I wouldn't be where I am without having the push that you gave us with the original prop blog, and the way that you let people, you didn't accuse people of things, but you just put the information out there, and you said, what is this? This picture is the one in the movie, and this is this in the auction. And I've always kept that. And I would strongly encourage that all people who buy things, when you look at the Blu-ray, ask yourself a question. If it's this color on screen, why is it not that color in the auction? If that thing's missing or this thing's added, that's your number one defense. If it doesn't look like the one in the film or the TV show, why are you buying it? And that's quite simply all I got to say about that.
Well, on that note, thank you for coming on. I appreciate everything you do. And people don't know this, but like you and I talk all the time. And anytime anything interesting happens, we're like, what the hell? what, what happened with that? But I plan on, I don't want people to think like someone's on the show once and they're done. Like there's a lot of people that I plan to talk to, on an ongoing basis. And you're one of those people because I always appreciate your insights. So
And
thank you for
anybody
that.
out there, anybody out there in the world, I've always had an open line of communication, Facebook Messenger. You ever have a question about a piece? I am happy to give the knowledge that I have for free.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to talk props. I'm happy to assist. You might not like the answer you get. It is sometimes an answer that is going to be a bit wishy-washy because no man can know everything about anything. But I would always say if I can help in any way, anybody out there in the community, I would be only too pleased to do that. And thanks for reading all the stuff that I've written, the videos that I've made, and I look forward to what we've got to do in the future. Be wonderful.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. Thanks everyone who tuned in, and I'll see you next time.